Chakraborty, sir.
Sure, thank you. Warm welcome to the respected panelists and all the participants in this session organized by IEEE Kolkata section in association with IEEE ComSoc Kolkata chapter. My regards to all the distinguished panelists who are going to share their valued inputs today on this topic. As many of you know, IEEE ComSoc Kolkata chapter is a very vibrant community with a healthy mix of students, academicians, and industry folks. In line with ComSoc Society's global mission statement, we work on creating forums for technical exchanges among professionals in academia, industry, and public institutions. We participate in many international and national conferences throughout the year, and now more so over digital platforms. So today's topic, mental well-being in the new normal, is very relevant in the post-pandemic scenario. I come from corporate. I work as the CIO in ABP. We are in work from home setup since last March, like many others, and I'm sure this will continue further. In fact, 92% of our workforce connects from home every day. So we are seeing many corporates are taking initiatives to make the employees comfortable in the new setup. I'm sure this will evolve in the days to come. We are eagerly looking forward to this session to know more on this aspect from all the experts. Thanks again to everyone for joining in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's said that Nari asya samajasya kushal vastukara asti. Women is the perfect architecture of this society. So now I will like to present a small PPT which will highlight the works of IEEE Women in Engineering. I'm Dr. Ankita Pramanik and I'm the Vice Chair of IEEE V Kolkata section. So IEEE Women in Engineering is a global network of IEEE members and volunteers who are dedicated to promoting women engineers and scientists, and our motto is to inspire girls around the world so that they follow their academic careers, especially STEM careers. And IEEE, as it is known to all, that it is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. The mission and vision of IEEE is that our goal is to facilitate the recruitment and retention of women in technical disciplines globally. It is to be noted that this is a vibrant community of women and men collectively using their diverse talents to innovate for the benefit of humanity. Often it is said as in jest, or people think that we are averse to taking help for men. No, it is not. We, both men and women, they have to work together to achieve the goals of establishing, recruiting, retaining women in their professional fields. So IEEE strives to provide assistance with the formation of new IEEE V affinity groups and support ongoing activities, recognize the outstanding achievements of women in electrical and electronics engineering through IEEE Awards nominations, organize workshops at major technical conferences to enhance networking and to promote membership in IEEE V, advocate women in leadership roles in IEEE governance and career advancement for women in the profession, promote member grade advancement for women to the IEEE membership grades of senior member and fellow, facilitate the development of programs and activities that promote the entry into and retention of women in engineering programs, administer the IEEE student teacher and research engineer scientist program to mentor young women in junior high and high schools. So these are the glimpses of few of the IEEE V global events. As you can see that this is a snapshot of the conference, and not just in India. These are the snapshots of various activities over the world. So as you can see that this is the violet marked region is our Asia Pacific region, the R10. So now what we do at IEEE V AG Kolkata section, our mission is same. We facilitate the recruitment and retention of women in technical disciplines globally. And our vision is to envision a vibrant community of IEEE women and men collectively the same as the IEEE V global vision, and the IEEE Affinity Group of Kolkata section was formed on July 28, 2006. It was formally inaugurated on September 1, 2006. Subsequently, the executive committee was constituted in its annual general meeting on January 18, 2007. I have seen this group form as when I was a BE student, and I'm very lucky to see the founding members of this group present in today's panel discussion as audience, and also as today we have them with us. Since its inception, We Kolkata section is continuing its successful journey for recognizing women's outstanding achievements in relevant fields through IEEE awards and nominations, organizing receptions at major technical conferences to enhance networking and to promote membership in We, advocating women in leadership roles in the profession, providing assistance to form new We groups and support them, promoting advancement of the IEEE member grades for women to the senior member and fellow, promoting the entry into retention of women in engineering programs, and administering the IEEE STAR program to mentor young women in junior and high schools. Now, IEEE V membership is access to IEEE winning award-winning IEEE V magazine. It gives access to IEEE V newsletter, discounted registration to the IEEE V International Leadership Conferences and Summits, IEEE V awards and travel grants, participate in exclusive IEEE V contests, volunteer opportunities, and appointments to IEEE V activities. We also engage in various activities like STAR program, IEEE forums, webinars, and local channels. And as you can see, women in leadership community. I will also like to mention that we at the IEEE Kolkata section have started a series, Dare to Dream, on pioneer women who had STEM careers in India. So the inaugural talk was on Rajeshwari Chatterjee, Professor Rajeshwari Chatterjee. The next session is in the month of April. We will request everyone to join in our Dare to Dream series. Thank you all. And so I will now hand over the session to our moderator, Ms. Sudeshna Mukhopadhyay. Ms. Sudeshna Mukhopadhyay is a graduate electrical engineer from Jadavpur University, Kolkata, India, and holds a master's degree in the same discipline from Connecticut, USA. Renowned industry expert in lighting applications with 33 years of extensive global experience in lighting technology, application, design, global project management in India and Asia Pacific region. She is the ex-head of Philips Lighting Design Center and Lighting Academy in Indian subcontinent and Asia Pacific region. She was also part of the founding team for a smart lighting startup, iBan Illumination Private Limited, with Swarovski as their brand. Currently works as a strategic lighting consultant to lighting startups, leading lighting manufacturers in India, and leading global lighting companies for overseas markets. She is well recognized by the lighting fraternity in India and overseas. She teaches lighting applications at leading institutions in India. She is member in various communities in Bureau of Indian Standards, National Lighting Code, and has been an active member and contributor in framing and writing the lighting chapters in Green Building Codes of Griha, IGBC, ISHRAE, CII NRG Council, member of the CIE, TC 342, Internal Commission on Illumination, and a fellow of the Indian Society of Lighting Engineers. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ankita. And I'm extremely glad and really indebted to the Women IEEE WIE. This is my, third association, program association with this esteemed organization. And I'm very humbled to be invited again to moderate this session. We have very eminent panelists today, so I'm not going to really take a lot of time in introducing the topic. I think for the last 1 year, I think as we speak today, it's almost what we can say an anniversary celebration when all of us had to almost overnight change our lifestyle and work style and whatnot. I mean, it was almost this time last year. I remember 13th March was my last travel when I flew in from Delhi to Kolkata, and then have been here since. So for a person who traveled almost 20 days a month, this whole year has been a complete revelation into my own work style and lifestyle as well. And I'm sure most of you have also experienced it. All changes are not always for bad. There are also positive outcomes, and there has been a lot of positive learnings also from my side. What I would do now is call upon the panelists. I will introduce them. We have a very, very distinguished panelist today. We are going to hear their perspective, and then of course we are going to have some time for deliberations and question answers amongst the panelists and questions also from the audience. Uh, our first panelist for today is Dr. Shushmita Mitra. Many of you, of course, know her well. Dr. Shushmita Mitra is a full professor at the Machine Intelligence Unit, Indian Statistical Unit Institute, Kolkata. From 1992 to 1994, she was in the RWTH Aachen, Germany as a DAD fellow. She was a visiting professor in the Computer Science Department of the University of Alberta, Edmonton, Canada, Meiji University, Japan, Aalborg University, Esbjerg, Denmark. Dr. Mitra received the National Talent Search Scholarship from NCERT, India, the University Gold Medal in 1988, the IEEE TNN Outstanding Paper Award in 1994 for her pioneering work in neurofuzzy computing, the CIMPA INRIA UNESCO Fellowship in 1996, and Fulbright Nehru Senior Research Fellowship in 2018-2020. She was the INE Chair Professor during 2018-2020. Dr. Mitra has been awarded the prestigious J.C. Bose National Fellowship 2021. Author of many books, editor of many distinguished journals, plenary speaker at numerous conferences, academic visitor to many international institutes, fellow of the IEEE for contributions to neurofuzzy and hybrid approaches in pattern recognition. She's a fellow of the INSA, fellow of the IAPR, and fellow of the INE and NACI India. She's also the member Inter-Academy Panel for Women in STEM, and also a IEEE CIS distinguished lecturer. It's an honor, absolute honor for me to welcome Dr. Shushmita and hear her views and deliberation on this topic, which has been a part of our lives for this 1 year. Over to you, Dr. Mitra. You may have to unmute yourself, Dr. Mitra.
Oh, I apologize. So thank you very much, Sudeshna, for those kind words. A very good evening to all of you here. So I've been asked to present the situation from the education or academic perspective. So let me start by sharing my slide. So am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll be talking on, so before we go on to the problems we face, let me introduce the challenges in the post-pandemic situation. And in education, it is one of the greatest challenges that education sector has faced. With the coronavirus pandemic, we have the new catchword, which is the new normal. So what was previously unfamiliar has become standard, usual, or expected. So we've been faced with lockdowns, quarantines, physical distancing, masks, sanitization, washing hands, taking vitamins and nutrient-rich food to nurture health, and the omnipresent support technology. So education is one of the worst affected scenario in the backdrop of COVID-19. The pandemic has resulted in an unprecedented change to the education system, resulting in a new reality. Governments have enacted varied responses to the COVID-19 across multiple dimensions. So there has been the policy response, ensuring a well-coordinated response and enacting emergency measures like mass closures of academic institutions. Then there has been the structural response, activating distance learning solutions and supporting infrastructure like delaying exams, canceling exams, adapting promotions without exams. So the social response in delivering solutions to meet the needs of students, researchers, educators, parents, and education leaders. Financial response, ensuring availability and accessibility of distance learning solutions through investment and partnership. So in the Indian scenario, most of the students do not have the requirements for the online systems. There is no doubt that the education system is facing serious challenges, but every institute needs to answer this as per their resources, students, and digital infrastructure. There is a need to devise a hybrid system which can bring a holistic dimension to the spectrum of education. The new normal in education should not paralyze the other aspects of personality development and should address to every section of the society. If not done, it will create a new divide in the society of digital haves and digital have-nots. Time to think, analyze, and innovate a new normal in the education system for creating more equality in society. At present, there is a drastic need to continue education through alternative pathways. This should be a priority of all governments to find out a standard operating procedure to continue with the alternative means of education. This situation should be addressed at three levels: at the global level, at the national level, and at the institutional level. So what needs to be done? Today's teachers have to embrace and master the technology that would establish connection and interaction at a different level towards a rich learning environment. Mastering meeting applications like Zoom and Google Meet is not simple for many teachers. And you should note that we have education starting from the grassroots school level to the college level, to the university level, to the higher education. And each of these institutions are equipped in different manners, and the students suffer as a result. So add to this is the learning management systems like Canvas and Moodle that one needs to be familiar with, depending on what the institution has subscribed to. So new techniques have to be taken up to traverse the learning curves. Let's assume the teacher is able to adjust. There are uncontrollable elements that the teacher cannot ignore. So when with our country's slow and intermittent Wi-Fi internet connection, a teacher must be ready for interrupted classes and dropped students. One might think that the delivery is getting on smoothly, but at the student's end, there may be occasional time-offs. With the pandemic affecting the economy and causing a recession and unemployment to rise, some families might not even afford the gadgets and internet speed needed for the smooth interconnection. Assessment is one of the most challenging aspects in online learning, especially in courses where evaluation is normally done with direct objective measurement tools. Proctoring a test is impractical and exams are necessarily on an open everything basis. It is not easy to discriminate student scores because of the wealth of reference material available. So teaching is in an online environment poses a lot of challenges to course design. And there are 4 elements that contribute to effective instructional design. If the content is not meaningful to the individual, the learner will have trouble in maintaining focus. The learning activities must leave a lasting imprint or be memorable to the learner. Learners must have the motivation to learn, otherwise they won't. And teacher talks about measurably improved performance that produces the needed results. Teaching in the new normal, especially online, must allow students to be engaged. The challenge to teachers is to make the instructional design meaningful, memorable, motivational, and in the end, measurable. In today's technological world, there are a lot of benefits in using the hybrid learning tools that leverage the internet to offer students a more personalized learning experience. They learn in one part through online learning and in another in a supervised brick and mortar classroom setting in the hybrid mode in the present scenario. This kind of blended learning works based on how it is implemented and provided it is designed to address the subject's special concerns. Success of this education system requires planning, preparation, diligence, and a degree of expertise, not just for the teacher, but also for the support systems. How many institutions would invest in a technology backbone that assists both teachers and students grappling with this problem? Are the resources readily available? Would there be adequate preparatory training? Lots need to be done. So some of the practical situations encountered as a result, you see, when the pandemic arrived, the developed world was more prepared to work in the online mode. At that time, unfortunately, I was in the United States, and I saw that they already had the online mode running. So it was not that much of a difficulty as we faced here. We were just, in India, we were just jolted out into a new reality. The students' careers were pushed back by 1 year, practically. And it affected the school students more, then the college students, then the higher education. High school students at the verge of choosing their career in class 10, 11, 12 were the worst sufferers of depression. Postdoctoral opportunities closed down all around the world. Job opportunities diminished drastically. Examination processing was virtually stalled. Admission systems had to stutter and stumble to come to their feet to handle the completely unknown domain. In our institute, which is one of national importance and possibly more well equipped than many others, even we had problems with the admission system. The admission had to be postponed. And then there were lots of flaws in getting into the online mode. There were unavoidable errors everywhere. We were not prepared, while the richer West was a little better off. The students' parents were also mentally affected with this entire period. You know, I have an experience, my PhD student, of course, his degree was stalled because nothing could be done. He couldn't submit. It was to be submitted in the University of Calcutta, and the PhD department didn't function. And then what happened was he had to spend time at home, and his mother got so attached to him, and now the mother is not prepared to let him go for his postdoctoral studies. So that is a mental situation for the parents as well. So the parents think that if the son goes, then he may face some adverse situation abroad and may not survive. That is the situation. So from the teacher's perspective, it is difficult to track the attentiveness of students during lectures. It is difficult to assess the presence of students because you can just turn on and then go off to talk or sleep or do whatever. You don't know who is listening to your talk or not. The research efficiency is seriously hampered because at home you don't get access to high-end computing facilities. Particularly in my domain, we need our students to work on high-performance computing, which is available in the institutional level. And if the institute is closed or partially closed, it becomes very difficult. And it is difficult to monitor the progress of the students. Then even after things are opening up, there is the risk of coming to office in jam-packed public transport because the students cannot obviously afford a private car like we can as teachers. So this is not a problem in the sparsely populated Western countries. You can go for a walk without a mask, nothing happens, even during the pandemic. Because I was there, I have seen. It's not a problem at all. And then after the students have faced all these situations, we are forced to provide grace marks to accommodate the students' plight, to make them promoted to the next class. So who suffers at the end? It is the students and their learning. This is some statistics. At the institutional level, the greatest need of the time is to go flexible with the times and adopt every method to ensure that the students do not suffer in terms of education. A survey by IIT Kanpur revealed that 9.3% of its 2,789 students were not able to download material sent by the institute or study online. Only 34.1% of them had internet connection good enough for streaming real-time lectures. Another survey conducted by local circles among 25,000 respondents found that only 57% of students had the required hardware, computer, router, and printer at home to attend online classes. So we sense that the normal isn't coming back, that we are being born into a new normal, a new kind of society, a new relationship to the earth, a new experience of being human. So adapting to the physical distancing, we shouldn't call it social distancing. It is more a physical distancing. We should learn to, what I feel, this is my personal perspective, you should learn to enjoy your own company, because being alone is not loneliness. One can be lonely in a crowd. So it doesn't matter whether you are alone or with infinite number of people. Loneliness is different. So you should learn to enjoy your own company. That gives mental peace. And I have also experienced and found in this period that meditation is a very good source of inner peace. And I think it suits every strata of society. It is very, very apt at this point. So with that, I thank you. And if there are any questions, we can take it at the end, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mitra. Thank you very much for really giving the perspective from the academic's point of view. I think this is one sector which was really affected. I mean, whether it is in school, whether we have, in higher education. So no matter whether you're in every level of education, I think one sector which really needed to adapt to the new normal has been the education center. Of course, we are going to come back later with questions. But before that, we were going to have the next panelist sharing his perspective. Our next panelist is Debashish Kanungo. Debashish is a consulting partner for the TCS Workforce Analytics and Insights. His diverse experience of more than 25 years in HR and OD and workforce analytics across multiple geographies in the US and Europe led to effective people integration and talent strategies. He has been instrumental in crafting and implementing talent transformation and management framework, enabling high performance work culture using technology and metrics and delivering robust organizational capabilities and process. Kanungo is a member of the National AHRD and an active member of various HR forums. By education, he holds a bachelor degree in law and master's in management studies, specializing in human resource and organizational development. He's also a certified HR analytics professional from Cornell University. Besides blogging in his spare time, Debashish loves to indulge in non-fiction reading. Over to you, Debashish. We'll have about 15 minutes from you, and then we will go to the next speaker.
Namaste, and thanks, Mr. Sudeshna, for your introduction. Good evening to all, and a happy Saturday. I feel extremely privileged to be invited to this forum with accomplished engineers and scientists, and along with the esteemed panel members here. I would just try to take something on the mental wellness part. But however, I would like to just draw upon some insights that Dr. Mitra had provided, is about the most effect that the pandemic had with the academia. It is today, I think that is affected not only the academia, but at a larger end, the family also, where it revolves around the children and the society at large. So for me, I would like to actually, if there's someone who can actually put my slides.
Dr. Mitra, if you can just stop presenting your part. You are still in a presentation mode. Yeah.
Is it okay now? Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Yeah.
now, Debashish, you can present.
Oh, is it visible now? Just is it visible now? My presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
It's not present. You have to click on present now and share your screen.
Is it now visible?
Yes, it's
Yes.
started.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Yes.
You can, just put it on full screen. That will be
Yeah.
more clear. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I would not get into the real definition of a mental health as defined by World Health Organization. What is a mental health or wellness? According to me, I'm not a expert in this field. As a layman, I can describe that the capacity of an individual to form harmonious relationship with his or her social and physical environment, and to achieve a balanced satisfaction of his or own drive. So it's basically a part of mental and emotional wellness is dependent on self-esteem, something to deal with mood or emotions, love of self, and others, etc. If I have to mention here the current scenario, it has been witnessed over the past year that the routine health services, including mental health care, are adversely affected in many countries, including India. Official media and digital social networking reports are suggesting an increase in mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress-like symptoms, insomnia, and anger among the general population, probably health workers, as well as the people who are kept in isolation due to infection in the coronavirus or whatever, contact with the infected person. So we have seen the same thing happening after the Wuhan effect in December 2019, when the first outbreak news came up. And if you notice the series of events that started, people feeling anger, frustration, insecurity due to economic downturn, aftermath, and now it is slowly we are trying to unlock. And within unlocking also, there is again anxiety about opening up schools. I have two adult kids. One goes to college. She was eager to go to the college, and but we as parents were not feeling that secure to send her to the college with the current situation happening and number of cases rising again. So the rapidly emerging mental health issues may destabilize individuals' general well-being and have immense potential to influence the health system. Hence, they need urgent and immediate attention and action. The community's mental health issues can be diverse and segregated when you talk about segregated as per the stressful events are concerned. But I was not surprised those suffering from other multiple personal problems are far more prone to respond negatively to a major stressful event. Increased mental health issues are also impacted by lack of support and cold responses from others, including employers, when combined with a sense of regret and amplified by lack of community support or previous social dogmas or psychological distress, which increases multifolds. This global confusion, human health risks and quarantine behavior can make symptoms including depression, anxiety, or PSTD worse. Further, in individuals with like obsessive compulsive disorder and somatic symptoms and persons with history of suicidal ideation and risk of transmissions may elevate the fear of contamination. I'm talking on the basis of the observations that we are having from the workforce perspective, where we are dealing with the workforce daily, day in, day out, and the industry. recognition of these issues. While lockdown policies defend against coronavirus transmission, they encompass segregation and feeling of loneliness that cause extreme psychological distress and may cause or worsen mental illness. Especially the elderly should be given special consideration because they are most susceptible and separated from the rest of the population. The rest of the population and the technological gap, that is the difference between generations that are aware of the currently emerging technologies and those who are not, might intensify the feeling of alienation and inadequacy among the older population. The inability to communicate on computers and mobile devices decreases social relationships. For example, I have my in-laws who are more than 80 years old and just being isolated at homes. They are trying to learn the technology in order to be in touch with the outer world, but it becomes very difficult at this age to learn the technology, whether it is WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. Besides that, normal accessibility to routine mental health services in most nations has also been greatly disrupted. And the compliance to this pharmacological or psychological treatment modalities has been potentially decreased also. Even though I personally am able to self-isolate in a safe environment and have access to resources to ensure my well-being, I too have experienced feelings of stress during this time. I cannot even begin to fathom the enormous stress being experienced by those without such resources. Take for example, in cities like Mumbai, where people are staying in one-room apartment with the whole family, striving to get a space for themselves. What I'm going to say in the next slide is how to kind of counter this. And according to me, it is the time discipline that we need to have for countering it. You just implement the same practices as you would in any other day before the crisis. Wake up, make a bed, shower, shave, eat, or breakfast, etc. Each person can devise their own routine or framework based on their own habits. I read somewhere that according to some scientist, I don't remember the name, some scientist that's Crisis Text Line, they use a platform that offers free confidential crisis interventions via text messaging. From nearly about 150 million messages they have been that have been exchanged on their platform so far, aggregated the data to prepare the mental health repercussions of this pandemic in 3 different ways. 1, moving away from the brick and mortar of academic institutions, moving away from office space and time, intrusion into homes with all activities in 4 dimensions of a home, which used to be a space for self or relaxation and personal mind space, has blurred the boundaries. And as any other system, blurring of boundaries create short circuits and probably inefficiencies. Hence, pandemic, its effect on isolation or pressure of work and home liabilities vary. Little avenues to escape is what actually exacerbate the negative influence in mental health. Therefore, a sense of time is of prime importance, maintaining a discipline of logical and physical distinction of home and office. Even at home, though easily said than done, it needs social emphasis in our daily life. We cannot think of the plight of people who stay. Again, I'm trying to repeat that, and I've seen that in front of me and having discussed with workforce. In 1-bedroom dwelling units and had to conduct a daycare, a school, office, elder care, etc. in the same space. Global issues like this can feel incredibly overwhelming because there is so much of uncertainty around it. Using words just as day, week, and year, when speaking to someone experiencing anxiety, gives them a sense of time and reassures them that this period will probably not last forever. Second, what they talk about is the relationship, the close relationship. Words such as family, mom, parent, close friends as family, are incredibly helpful to use around this time. This is because on one hand, people are worried about what is going to happen to their family members and those close to them. But speaking about those close relationships also increase the sense of stability for the person experiencing stress or anxiety. Family support behavior is of primary importance to feel safe and remove anxiety or stress.
Devashish, I'm just sorry to interrupt. I mean, are you progressing the slides, because the slides are not changing?
No,
I'll be in that interest of the time, because
I
we'll have to
I
go
have
through.
few slides only. I'll just
Okay.
carry on faster then. At no point in time we have witnessed such importance of family and friends with the blurring of physical or logical boundaries of work. Third, normalize the anxiety. Make apparent to the individual that that they are not alone in the feeling the way they do. Normalize the anxiety and it can feel very validating the person in crisis, as shown in them. This feeling is normal. It is argued, of course, that to pay special attention to the children during this time. I'll go for example, who are witnessing this. Let me just take you to the probably in the interest of time. How much time do I have, Sudeshna? Hello.
About 5 more minutes.
Okay, fine. Then my next few slides actually will give you some evidences of how it is today and the top organizational concerns in the pandemic. So this slide actually is taken from research from a product company who actually deals with about their well-being, workforce well-being, and they have working with about 120 organizations with more than 40,000 employees, and they find that this is the statistics that they find. The maximum is about the stress, work-life balance, and the general anxiety. That is across all segments of workforce, and they've broken down into and this organization is called as Way Forward. I've mentioned of this source, and they've broken down as per the age of the workforce. And if you notice this statistics, the maximum, if you look at, is
the slide is not visible if you have not changed the slides. Your slide is the plus side. It's the first slide which is shown.
Oh, I'm okay. So that is why you mentioned that I've actually, it is showing, and how do I change that? Otherwise, it is showing.
You have to just click. Can you click on the slide, which one you are presenting?
I will suggest you click on the left panel. On
Yeah.
the left panel, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can. Is it visible to you?
It is visible to me. I'll just see.
Which slide you want to present? Second, third, or which one?
There's the third slide.
Yes, please click on the third slide in your left panel.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I put it on full screen, so that's why I couldn't actually toggle.
It is not showing as full screen in the cast.
F5, sir.
Oh, okay.
F5 laptop or PC.
Okay, I can see that now. So this actually talks about what I was talking about, the statistics. The stress, work-life balance, and the general anxiety, what actually comes out as very, very prominent with moderate to high impact from the database of our 40,000 people where Way Forward has implemented in organizations. So these are the top organizational concerns related to the pandemic with stress levels, which they have generated out of their database. And the fourth slide, which is the next slide, is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So now, what actually it means that as per the age category, you'll see that 18 to 35 age group, a large proportion of the employees are they also report moderate to high levels of depression and marked loss in productivity. There is also a high level of anxiety, if you notice, between 16 to 35, and depression, of course. And then you have the impact of work-life balance, if you notice at the rightmost column. So what it says is that it has increased the prevalence of mental and emotional health conditions across age and gender groups. So that's where I wanted to come out with some statistics in order to support that mental health or mental wellness need to be considered as of prime importance, not at the societal level, but at the national level as well. My next slide is a slide which actually in TCS we organized, and as Dr. Mitra also mentioned, is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible.
So we organized that in order to deal with it, we look at the 5 dimensions of body, energy, mind, intellect, and self, and yoga as the method to adopt in order to make sure that the people are addressing, of course, the self at a blissful state, but addressing at least the first 3 stages of the body, energy, and mind. And what actually balances this is the metabolism, what are the body are the external factors, and it actually addresses from leaves to the highest dimension of the root causes. So when you actually have stress, then it actually deranges the intellect also. It doesn't give you the dimension of the true nature of the stress. When you look at an integrated yoga interventions in organization, which we started with some 1,000 people or with volunteers, a handful of volunteers, now it has reached across the organization, across the globe, TCS, and we found that, okay, this has now moved and people are interested because they are getting the benefit of it. And it is a self volunteered kind of movement within the organization. So we started with this small handful of volunteers, and it has gained momentum immensely within the last 1 year. And we find that starting with providing them with awareness about what diet, what exercises, what kind of sports, what kind of cleansing practices, and of course the techniques of the breathing, and of course meditation, what Dr. Mitra had mentioned about meditation, and the emotional culture that we need to build within ourselves, within our family, then counseling. All these actually provide the effect of the outcomes that we are looking for. That is a healthy body, or an energy, pure energy, or clear and equanimous mind. And in a lighter note, I want to actually mention that I got a WhatsApp message just a few days back, and I thought I have to actually give it here. So it here is. This message is very interesting because not all our WhatsApp messages are rubbish. Some are like this, where we understand the chemical composition within our body and what it takes for a person to energize all those chemicals within and use it healthily from a health perspective, as the dopamine or oxytocin or serotonin or endorphin. These are the things which, of course, is self-explanatory. But what I would like to stress upon here is that the mood stabilizer is very important here. Of course, they reward the chemicals because the self-esteem is what provides us with, gets us away from the loneliness, or the feeling of loneliness, because you start loving yourself. But the mood stabilizer is where you need to get out, swim, cycle, get into the sun, running, or meditating. These are all the things that we need to do in order to get away from the feeling of loneliness or mental anxiety, or kind of feeling secluded or probably hurting you with respect to your social behavior is concerned. These are the few things that probably we need to take care in our daily life in order to get. And this pandemic, we do not know how long will it going to last, or is there going to be a new change, a new order that is going to come. But what I feel is that it is not about a new normal or about obtrusive normal, but I would say Sada suggests that we all, if you think about that is optimistically, that it will be a better normal, then probably we'll get over this pandemic very well across. That's what I can say. I hope I'm within this 15 minutes, Sudeshna.
Thank you very much, Devashish. And I think we are your presentation ends on this happiness chemicals, and it's a perfect also setting for me to welcome the most relevant speaker. I mean, in terms of the contribution, in terms of the professional expertise when we are talking about mental well-being. Our last speaker for today's panel is Dr. Aratrika Sen. Dr. Sen passed MBBS from North Bengal Medical College and Hospital in 2013. She then completed her MD Psychiatry from the Institute of Psychiatry, IPG-MER and SSKM Hospital in 2019. Currently, she's a senior resident in the Department of Psychiatry, Murshidabad Medical College and Hospital. See, so far we have been listening to the practitioners, from the academic field, from the corporate area, that how it has impacted wellness. And we are now going to hear from Dr. Sen that as a psychiatrist, that how she perceives the subject and how it is going to influence us. Is it going to stay with us, and how do we look towards the future? Over to you, Dr. Aratrika Sen, with a request to you to keep the discussion within 15 minutes so that we have at least 15 minutes for question answers and some discussions amongst ourselves. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. My previous speakers, thanks to them and thanks to IEEE and WIE Kolkata chapter for giving me this opportunity, and I'm much less experienced than all of you. So trying my best to do justice to this opportunity. So talking about mental health in the new normal. So what is normal? According to, we think that which is typical or expected from us or from the society. But now we know that this COVID-19 crisis, it has changed our lifestyle, our work habits, our personal experiences, our daily routine, interaction with family, friends, our colleagues, and everything in a huge manner. In short, it has made a paradigm shift from our day-to-day living. Now, we'll call it a normal phenomenon. Was it really typical or expected? And maybe the answer is blowing in the wind. That is the coronavirus. But considering the fact that to combat this deadly virus and to flatten the curve, to save the world, to stay alive, we must adapt to it and embrace this changing scenario. And there lies the concept of the new normal. I found this quote in internet while preparing the presentation. That is the only way to make sense out of the change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Now, what is this COVID-19 pandemic? I think that it is more severe than what it has been portrayed. More emphasis has been given on the physical symptoms like cough, fever, decreasing SpO2. We all know happy hypoxia. We are regularly reading on the internet, in the newspaper, we are seeing it on the TV. But the psychological symptoms remain unnoticed. It has been seen that almost 20 to 30% of COVID survivors are dealing with serious mental health ailments. There can be depression, there can be anxiety, dementia, or PTSD, there can be substance abuse. Now, is there any contributory negligence on the part of the society? Yes, the social stigma, the myths about the COVID. There is decreased interaction, isolation, and negative expressed emotion towards the COVID recovered patient. The patient has come back from COVID, but still the society is secluding him. No, we won't talk with him, we won't go to help him when he's in need. There is false information portrayed in social media that that person in that locality is having COVID, but he is not revealing the news. There is YOLO journalism, and people have a tendency to box up rather than opening up. Now, the mental health, in per se, I have tried to divide it into three categories. The mental health in the COVID survivors, mental health in adult population in general, and mental health in children and adolescents. Now, in COVID survivors, as I said, that 20 to 30% of COVID survivors have later developed significant psychological ailments. The main type by which the COVID survivors are developing psychiatric ailments are two. One is direct method and one is the indirect. In case of direct transmission, I try to keep it in short and easy way that the COVID virus, they're crossing the blood-brain barrier, they're attacking the brain directly, and the persons are developing neuropsychiatric manifestations like they're having delirium, they're having acute psychosis, they're having encephalopathy. The second, the indirect method, is when the COVID virus by other method, they are affecting the psychological wellness of the patient. That is mostly depression. Again, there is anxiety of getting reinfected or developing extreme fear of death, a morbid fear of death, that is thanatophobia. Post-traumatic stress disorder-like symptoms, mostly it is seen in ICU survivors and old age patients. There is autonomic hyperactivity among these patients. They are having racing heart, palpitations, sweating, a feeling of impending doom, and there is marked abundance of anxiety-provoking situations. And lastly, the economic crisis. The huge expenditure due to the illness, absenteeism from job, loss of business, they all contribute to depression. Next, the mental health among the adults. Apprehension and anticipation about getting infected. There is job crisis, there is business failures, economic turmoil with difficulty to feed the family. Overtly preoccupied with hygiene. There has been seen that there is exacerbation of pre-existing obsessive compulsive disorder. Almost 30 to 35% of OCD patients have exacerbation of their symptoms in this COVID-19. And there is also emergence of new OCD symptoms in the persons who had not developed OCD in previous. Decreased interaction with family and friends, decreased communication, feeling of loneliness, they are adding to the depressive symptoms. Mental health in the children. 4 to 14 years of the age group, they are the most vulnerable. They cannot go outside, they cannot meet their friends, they are not having any outdoor games. So what is the result? They are having an increased interest in internet. They are having increased interest in mobile and laptop due to online classes. There is gaming addiction. In case of adolescents, they are developing adolescent crisis. They are constant under the supervision of their parents, which they are not liking. The parents are not understanding the adolescent is not understanding their parents. There is increased irritability, depression among them. In case of younger children, we found there is exacerbation of the ADHD symptoms, that is the attention deficit hyperkinetic disorder, and ASD symptoms, that is autism spectrum disorder symptoms. There is hyperactivity, repetitive behavior, and increase in temper tantrums. There is language delay in the younger children. In case of language delay, we despite the parents to give the children in a play school where they can interact with other kids, their teachers, and their development of language progresses. But this is not at all an option now. Now, coming to the intervention, I've tried to keep the intervention in layman's term, that what we can do to ourselves. So first of all, not social distancing, it should be physical distancing. We have to remember, because I am, because we are. Communication and interaction should be maintained over video conferences, over phone calls, over social platforms. We have to remember that communication is not just about physical proximity. We can develop some new hobbies which give pleasure to us, or some hobbies which we have left long ago because of our professional career. We can start with them. We can reduce the time spent on watching news and share verified information only. Self-care, exercise regularly, sleep well. We can download meditation app, as Dr. Mitros madam said. We can do some creative work. We can maintain these 3 hygiene methods to prevent COVID-19, that is hand hygiene, wearing the mask correctly, and maintaining physical distance. And what we can do, we can change our thinking. We call it cognitive reframing. That is, me and my friend can't see each other. That is, we are protecting each other and we are protecting the world. I'm stuck at home. I'm not stuck at home, I'm safe at home. And I'm keeping the world safe. I've lost all my freedom. No, I'm doing it for a noble purpose. I miss the things I love and increasing gratitude for the things I love. Now, intervention in children and adolescents, I have taken this from Minhan's guidelines. Minhan's Bangalore have published these guidelines during COVID-19 pandemic, that how to take care of your child or adolescent. So what issues the child or adolescent can have? They can worry about school or college reopening. They're anxious about the subjects, the exams. They're not being able to play outside. They fear that they might get the virus, or their parents, siblings, grandparents can get the virus, or their very near or dear ones might die. Concern about finances, or in case of adolescents, there can be fights between the parent and the child. Now, what can parents do? Parents can make a routine for their child, like a time for exercise in the day, a time to keep the child much as engaged as possible with interesting and creative activities, monitor their diet, monitor their sleep, limit the use of mobile phone, internet-based activities, reduce the school and exam-related stress by talking directly to their kin, reduce the things that causes anxiety to the children. That is, don't discuss family financial issues in front of your children. Do not watch much of COVID-related news with your children. And if it is causing anxiety to the children, don't say them that everything is fine, don't worry. Tell them that it is we are going through a time that is not expected, but we'll overcome it. Next, what if our family has contracted the virus? We should tell the children not to panic. We should listen to the advice of the doctor. And if the family needs to be quarantined, we need to make our child understand that we are doing it for the betterment of his close one and also other people. Now, pandemic effect on the suicide. As we know that suicide has markedly increased in the COVID-19. And many of you might know that in Japan, they have appointed a Minister of Loneliness. In September 2020, it was seen that more deaths have happened in Japan due to suicide than due to COVID-19. It has been seen mostly in adolescent and early adulthood. Lockdown, less outdoor activity, more screen exposure have pushed them. There is unmasking of some inner traits, that is impulsivity or deliberate self-harm, and increased substance abuse have an additive effect on the suicidal ideations. Now, these are some warning signs that the person may be depressed most of the time. There is thought about hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness. There is self-isolation, poor self-care, extreme anhedonia, giving away prized belongings, arrangement for will in case of elderly person, and constant preoccupation with death and dying. Now, when to take professional help? We can always deal with this by ourselves, but Sometimes we need to take a professional help. That is unable to cope up with our stress despite our best efforts. I'm having a chronic low mood, chronic worry about my future. I lost interest in all my previous hobbies. I'm feeling fatigued all the time. I'm having insomnia with sleep, severe anxiety, excessive washing habits, and not at par with the situation, and maybe ideas of self-harm and suicidal ideations. If you are facing this, or any near or dear one is facing this, then you should seek the help of a psychiatrist or clinical psychologist. Now, things may never go back to normal. You may need to create a new normal, and that's okay. So, as per Charles Darwin, we know there's a survival of the fittest. And ending on a lighter note, that new normal protocol, we should avoid touching men, that is mouth, eyes, and nose, and instead we should follow women, that is wash our hands, obey social distancing, mask up, exercise and eat well, and no unnecessary traveling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arakrita. I mean, that was really a very nice ending to today's panel discussion. We will be, I mean, I've been hearing all of you, and we've been talking about the challenges which all of us have faced.
Sudeshna madam, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but may I request, so we can take a group photo now and also at the end of the meeting?
Okay.
May I request everyone to please switch on their videos?
We have.
Sure, Ankita. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought just to, wrap up today's discussion before we open for the questions from the attendees. We've been all plagued with, we've been all discussing challenges. So I thought, I mean, we've seen so much of contrast happening while we have been talking about, feeling very isolated, not being able to go out. Many of us have also faced the issue of not having enough privacy because you're at home, right? You don't get your space. We've been so used to be outside going work. So you had your own world, maybe even your own geographies, and people started missing that. There is one group of people who are working from home, so they feel isolated, but at the same time, they are in a much more safer environment. I deal with a lot of organizations, and especially with the sales and marketing community. So from May onwards, they are already in office because, somewhere business needs to get going and you need to generate money. So for them, they have an anxiety that, okay, there is one group of people who are working from home. So they feel very privileged, but, we are always at much more risk. So, there is always this contradictory emotions which are there, whether you're working from home or whether you are working outside home now. So once you start going to office, it's not a comfortable situation always as well. Not that those people are feeling very, very positive because they are in office. They feel that people who are working from home are probably much more safer and not forced to get exposed. On the positive side, I've experienced it. I had two PhD students in Jadavpur University, and I've been after them to complete their dissertation. And so they took the pandemic break, let me put it that way, and finally completed their dissertation and successfully defended their thesis online. Probably we didn't, we never knew that it could be done online, and they had their PhD thesis defense online amongst them. I've also seen a lot of friends, nurturing gardening as a hobby, which probably working professionals, people who had to spend a lot of time outside home, could not nurture anything. I'm not, talking about cookery, because probably that's not all good, but I really sort of felt very positive when I saw a lot of my friends, taking up gardening as a hobby, which of course I think will have a positive contribution to the entire sustainability part of it. As Aratrika, Debashish, and Dr. Sorry, and Dr. Mitra also mentioned that probably this is how the life is going to be, and this is going to be, we won't even use the word new normal. This is the normal where, before realizing, we will all integrate our lives, even post vaccination. It's not yet proven that it's going to be really a safe world. So that worry is going to be all there. We've learned a lot, and it's a time of adaptation and getting into a new phase. With this, I would also hand it over to Ankita, if you would like to moderate in taking in questions from our the people who have joined in from the attendees. And you could direct the question in general or to any particular speaker if you want.
Everyone, you may please type the question in chat box or may unmute yourself and ask questions.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello?
you're.
I can hear you.
Just I'd like to ask question to Debashish Kanungo. Actually, he was
If
talking
you can
about
introduce yourself, ma'am, if you can just also
Okay.
introduce.
Okay, I am Professor Riti Shaha Mishra from Jadavpur University. I am the founder chair of Women in Engineering Kolkata section and just past chairperson of Communication Society. So very nice to be here. Today's event is very essential in this pandemic situation. I have listened all those speakers. My question is that to Mr. Debashish Kanungo, actually mental wellness does depend on individual strength of mind and habits, good preaching, etc. This is a very short question. What is your suggestion for mentally weak person for this pandemic situation?
It's a very good question. I do not know how to define weak, but mental wellness, you're right that it is a state of your mind. And the same mind which you consider as strong in certain situation may become weak in another situation. For example, I may be very strong in dealing with a situation at office with my colleagues and bosses and all that. But when I come home and something happens to my children, I become mentally weak in dealing with that situation and get stressed. So my suggestion would be that whenever there is scope of understanding yourself about where do you actually counter problems with respect to making decisions or having to introspect further so that you do not get into the negative side of your demonstrable behavior and think about yourself, and probably that is the best way to attach yourself to the situation. To be honest, I don't know whether I have answered your question, but as an HR professional, we never talk about weakness. We talk about improvement or areas of improvement. So probably my answer is like that.
Okay, thank you. Actually, this is the most positive part of thinking the thing, how we could overcome our difficulty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, may I come in? If no one is asking,
Sure.
any questions, so may I
Absolutely.
come in? Shudhashmati? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm Shudhika Chatterjee. I am part of this Communication Society and Women in Engineering. I'm associated with Jadavpur University. So I'm so happy to see Professor Iti Shah Mishra and Professor Sholil Kumar Sanyal, because Professor Mishra is the founder chair of Women in Engineering. And when it was founded, then Professor Sholil Sanyal was the chairman of IEEE Kolkata section. So I had been associated with that since its inception. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Atidi. My question is to Dr. Aratrika. Dr. Aratrika, you just talked about two different terms, the depression and anxiety. These are the two different mental states. Okay. So as a layman, I would like to know, can I say like that which one comes first? I mean, depression causes anxiety or anxiety causes depression? Because this is a very confusing thing to general person. We normally we don't know that whether we are depressed or we are anxious. So because the very small kid, they also say, oh, I am depressed, or someone says ki I am very anxious, but actually we don't understand the difference. Or can you please tell us that how to know or how to get that feeling that whether we are anxious or depressed? Thank you.
Yes. First of all, there are two different situations.
Right.
Anxiety is a different disorder, depression is a different disorder. So what causes, like they are not, like depression is not causing anxiety or anxiety is not causing depression. They can co-occur together in a person. A person can be depressed, a person can be anxious, but they are not the cause or effect of each other in general. Now, what is depression? Depression is the mood must be low of the person. The person will say, I'm not feeling good. I don't feel good about myself. I don't feel good about the society. I don't feel good about anything in the world. That if you know, like I know in some psychology, you have to study that the PECS cognitive triad, that is not feeling good about self, the future, and the environment. Now, and what happens in anxiety? It is a situation provoking. Like there can be a generalized anxiety. Like whatever I have to do, I have to take a decision, or I'll have to go to a new place, or maybe some situation, a crowded place or a closed place, causes myself to be anxious. Like I constantly start thinking, what will I do? What will happen if I go in that situation? Will I be able to perform definitely like performance anxiety? But before delivering a speech, I myself have that. I am having that. Will I be able to deliver this speech correctly? Will my participants, will my fellow audience will be able to understand me? In a situation that is causing a series of symptoms in that person. It can be anxiety is more associated with somatic symptoms like palpitation. Like we say in layman's term that butterflies in the stomach. And বাংলায় সোজা কথা বললে গুড়গুড় করছে, পেট গুড়গুড় করছে। প্রচন্ড ঘাম হওয়া, the sympathetic overactivity, the autonomic nervous system, in that the sympathetic nervous system gets overactive. That we can have palpitation, increased sweating. These are the main symptoms of anxiety. But in case of depression, what happens? Depression makes the person not feel good. Like I'm not feeling good about anything. Whatever was I used to like watching television. I used to like cooking very much, but I'm not feeling doing that anymore. I'm not feeling like talking to my friends, which I used to like previously very much. I'm feeling fatigue all the time. The term we use, anhedonia, that is whatever was pleasurable to me before my depressive disorder, it's not at all pleasurable to me as now. And more commonly, the suicidal ideations or the death wishes, the death wishes are more common than suicidal ideations. They are more common in depression generally, not so much with anxiety. And with both this disorder, like we always say that খুব anxiety হচ্ছে বা আমার খুব depression হচ্ছে, but when we professionals term as disorder. A disorder must be termed when there is definite social, occupational, or personal dysfunction. We don't call it a disorder unless there is a dysfunction. A mental illness or a psychiatric illness is something we cannot see, or we cannot see it in a CT scan or a USG. We get a USG done and we cannot diagnose the patient is having depression. So we search for definite dysfunction in the person's life. And what is the motto of our treatment is to get that person back in their daily life as who will give back something to the society and who can do their job well, who can maintain their personal life well. This is the basic difference.
I have a question for Dr. Aratrika Sen as a panelist. Am I allowed to?
Yes,
Absolutely, absolutely, Dr. Mitra.
Before that, thanks, Dr. Aratrika. Nicely explained. Okay, Shushmita, you can go.
Yeah, so there is this issue of bipolar disorder,
Yes.
so where you do not understand that a person has depression, but there exists. And apparently the person is very happy, but still there are suicidal tendencies.
Yes,
For
I
example,
know.
the recent Sushant Singh Rajput case,
Yes.
one example perhaps. So, how do you explain that, or how do you deal with it? How do you diagnose it in the family?
Yes. Now we'll have to understand that what is bipolar, why we are calling it bipolar. Because the person is experienced to extreme poles of emotion, that is extreme happiness and extreme sadness. A bipolar patient can be depressed. So a person who is coming to me with depression for the first time, I am diagnosing him with depressive disorder, but he might in the future turn out to be a bipolar patient. But when a patient is coming with manic feature, that, as you say, that is extreme happiness, extreme grandiose ideas, with thinking himself to be a big person, that is a manic feature. So when a person is in the manic stage, it is easier to diagnose bipolar. But when the person is in depressed stage, first episode is depression, then it is difficult to diagnose bipolar. So bipolar is not only about being manic. Bipolar is the person is switching between two extreme poles of mood, that is manic and depression. And suicidal ideation, and if we go by the statistics, professional statistics, it has been seen that bipolar disorder has more suicidality than depressive disorder. In case of, and there's a lots of complex theories, many suicides tend to happen from the auditory hallucinations that the patients are having. They tend to auditory hallucinate voices of gods, that the God is telling them, you are very important to us, come to heaven. That I have some of my patients, they told me that Ma Kali amake dakche, amake opore giye onek kaj korte hobe. So, and someone gets command hallucination as to cut your throat or sacrifice yourself to the God. This can also be a type of the suicide. And when a bipolar patient is in the depressed state, there is also suicidality is much higher than unipolar depression.
So is this hereditary or due to some trauma?
Any psychiatric hereditary is must, not must, but very common. Like any psychiatric illness, I should say, is I cannot give one cause to a psychiatric illness. Perhaps my father or mother has bipolar illness, so I am born with that gene that might cause bipolar illness to me in the future. So it can happen that I passed on whole of my life without getting the disorder. But it can also happen that there is a single trauma, there is a single environmental factor that triggered that gene, that triggered the bipolar gene in myself, and the bipolar is precipitated. And sometimes it has also been seen that the family history is not there, but there is we can see bipolar in the patients. But family history is very important. Like in case of bipolar, it is very much readable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aratrika. I think this is such an involved subject, and we can go on and on this subject, and it's still not enough to really get an insight. I'm sure as a psychiatrist, you would be the best person to judge that people's mind is more complex than any of the complex mathematical, issues which we probably deal with. Thank you so much for being with us and your, deep insights. Ankita, we are just past 5:30 now, so I hand it over to you for the closing, for the closure of today's panel. This is such an involved discussion. Thank you very much, all the panelists, Debashish, Aratrika, Dr. Shushmita. It's been a real pleasure and an honor for me to be moderating this session. We had such wonderful insights, and I'm sure all the attendees and joinees have immensely benefited from the discourse of all our eminent panelists. Thank you very much for inviting me once again, and it's been a real pleasure, moderating this session with all these so very, very knowledgeable and eminent panelists. Over to you, Ankita.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, speakers. May I now request Professor Sudipta Mukherjee to please propose the vote of thanks.
Yeah, it's strategy. Anyway,
Sorry, Professor Sudipta Chatterjee to propose the vote of thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Ankita. It's my great honor to deliver vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Women in Engineering, Kolkata section and Communication Society under Kolkata section, I profusely express my thanks to all the speakers, Professor Shushmita Mitra, Mr. Debashish Kanundu, and Dr. Aratrika Sen for sharing their valuable views with us on this challenging topic. Special thanks to our moderator, Ms. Sudeshna Mukhopadhyay, for conducting and summarizing the discussion in such a structured and interesting manner. I'd also like to thank our committee members for their valuable suggestions regarding this event. Now, it is the time to convey our heartfelt thanks to all the participants for making this event happen. Dear participants, without your cooperation, this event would have never been a success. I hope that you will be getting your wholehearted support for all our future events. Thank you once again. Stay healthy, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, all of you.
Thank you.
You too. Okay. Go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, shall we take another group photo?
It's
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend.
Very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. Thanks all.